Right, there it is.
There it is.
Now it's yeah. Let me put the link in the old chat.
Do you see something?
Yeah, I can see the promo video and everything's playing. I'm hearing the voice.
Very good, very good. So the people hear us already. This is awesome. Ay, ay, ay.
But I'm getting like feedback. I'm getting all the feedback in your audio. I can't hear you.
We're back. We're back. Right now. Right now. For sure.
Roger, I'm getting all the feedback.
You're getting feedback? Okay.
Yep, I get all the feedback from YouTube.
Then you have to close YouTube.
I don't have the volume from the volume's shut off.
Wait.
Hello.
And if all is alright, we are live. You know what? Something went totally wrong. And you know what? I'm going to introduce immediately Mike over here. Mike, you are on right now. And if all is alright, people can hear us and people can see us. And if something is wrong, please let us know. Then we can fix it. Testing 1 2 1 2. Can you imagine this? Almost all weekend testing, and on the moment of, well, like this, on the right moment, for sure I made a mistake. Mike, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show. This is really a great honor to have you here. You're the MV legend. You're the product specialist of Roland, of the MV. And now you're in my humble show, in my humble stream. It's really, really cool. Great. Thank you so much for being here.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we all appreciate it, and I see in the chat because I've learned something. Mike explained me something about OBS that I can see the chat also during the show, which is awesome because in my previous shows I had the chat put in the screen and I lost some screen format, and now I have the chat next to it, so I can see the chat, I can see you all, and I can see Mike, and sometimes I'm looking also to another camera because Mike is over there. Well, this is the Zoom connection we have, but we have the connection over here with us. Yeah, so cool. And let me see who is in the house. I see so many great names. Grtzzz 8800, thank you for being here. Bakerman, Stefan, Joe Collier, Bram from Holland also here. Illinois, J Pro channel, Matey Mate, super cool. Yeah, we had to change. Can you imagine? So many weeks I have this link, and now we have another link for this live show. Anyway, doesn't matter at all. I do have here all the questions from the people, and I've forwarded them also to Mike. And Mike and I had a conversation already on Friday, and Mike said also that he would love to have an interactive, dynamic show because that is what makes it more fun instead of going from tip from 1 to 10 or to 100. I don't know how many questions will be asked, but most important thing is to have this interactive combination. So meanwhile, I see Keys is also here. Reed Russell Jr., Jason Shannon. Yeah, Jason Shannon. Your first question is over here. It's very cool. So Mike, today Sunday.
Yes.
It's Sunday, 6th of March. My Sunday is ending. Your Sunday is still half because I do have this website, the MIDI Maniac or MVPlanet.com, and I am totally surprised about the amount of people from all over the world joining this community, and it's really amazing. And for sure, you you can you have the experience also with people from all over the world regarding MV or music in general, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been pretty surprising to see. I think when the MV first came out, and I would probably say maybe 10 years later, and even now, like looking at the different forums, I think primarily when it first came out, you had a lot of, US users and, really, really big amongst like the hip hop community and stuff. And then now it's pretty cool to see that universally, like globally, you have a really wide variety of musicians that have the MV, and the ways that they use it are like completely different. I've seen some guys that are doing more acoustic soft rock kind of stuff, and they love the MV, which you wouldn't really think of as most guys that are maybe acoustic, guitar players and things like that. They would probably just stick with something like Pro Tools or something like that and just put drum loops in. But a lot of them seem to really love the hands-on feel and kind of just being in the box, which is awesome. And then I've seen guys that, are doing more drum and bass kind of stuff, on it, which makes sense, because typically when jungle first started and everything, I mean, it's all sample-based breaks and everything, so it totally makes sense. But it's nice to see because, especially when it's somebody that's younger, that they have the option to immediately just go for Ableton Live, right? Like everybody just, I'm just going to use FL Studio or Ableton Live. That's just the mentality now. Nobody thinks about just being completely hardware based, starting out. So it's pretty cool to see that not only do you have the older generation of musicians that, are still using hardware based, setups and still hardcore lovers of the MV, but then to see younger generation of musicians picking these up used and things like that and finding that magic inside of it and really putting it to use. So it's been good to see all that stuff.
Yeah, that's I agree on that. It's amazing how it keeps on evolving or coming back. I mean, if we look at the Roland, how is it called, Heritage? We saw first the analog machines, then analog was totally out, and then it came digital, and then analog came again, and then the MV had, well, I don't know if it had the problem, but then software based musicians came in, and now I must admit the MV is totally back, and well, that's my feeling, my opinion regarding the MV. Meanwhile, I have to see this because I see Sinosaur also in the chat, and John Stanhope, J-Mac is also Cytosonic. Mike, it's so cool to see all those names here in the chat because, well, I've never been in the MV Nation because I started with the MV in 2018, and man, the MV-8000 is already from 2003. So next year, already 20 years old, and you were a serious part of MV Nation, I assume.
Yeah, I tried to do my best to be on hand, working with the moderators at the time, which I believe was like George Coleman. I think he goes by the name Baby G. And there was a couple of other guys, like in the chat room, you have Keys Be Me. There was a bunch of guys that were really championing, the MV when it first came out. And but there's no mistake that when the MV first came out, it had a massive learning curve on it. If you were coming from like an MPC or anything else, the way that it did things was very, very different. And we'll get into this later, but I mean, it's what led to obviously making the revisions and completely changing around the operating system. But once that came out, like obviously, we didn't have social media the way that it is today.
No.
It wasn't interactive. So part of what I was doing was getting my own YouTube channel up and going, and I think I started that like in 2005 or so. And as I was beginning to put content on there, it was it was kind of a touchy touch and go situation, because at the time a lot of companies weren't on YouTube yet. They weren't doing anything on any sort of social media platform at the time. I think the business models that a lot of companies, at least in the music industry, were doing, it was that mentality of, we want all traffic to come to the actual website.
Yeah.
And then whatever's on the website there is what people will get in terms of, help or instructional material. But the fact of the matter is that not everybody was going to go, to a specific website. Not everybody could easily find the instructional content on a website, because once you go to a website, you're bombarded with all the new products, and there's so much stuff, and it's like, where do you go to find a simple instructional video about the MV in a massive, it's like walking into like one of the biggest mega shopping malls, and all you want is a pair of socks.
Yeah, correct. Where to go?
So where do I go, and how do I do it easily and quick? Like, I don't want to walk through this mall for half an hour trying to find a store, or the right store, that has a pair of socks. I just want some damn socks. So I think that's where YouTube really played a big part, and that's where I felt like I was going to put any instructional content that I did on my channel, because I was pretty much out in the trenches every day, at different music stores, training people and demonstrating the MV and showing people how to use it. And so, obviously I already knew what the most common questions were. So those were the first things that I wanted to try to address in any sort of like instructional video content.
Yeah.
But with doing that and putting that up there, obviously at the time, Roland was kind of pushing back and saying like, oh, well, you can't really put, your stuff on the YouTube channel. You got to be careful because Japan doesn't really want to do that. And again, at the time, it was brand new. So I already knew where things were going to go with YouTube. And I knew that this was the direction that we were going to need to go in order to service our customers better with instructional content on the products that we had, because it needed to be separated from all of the clutter of the main website. So I still kept doing it. And I think obviously eventually, Roland caught on, and they saw that it wasn't a bad thing. It was actually really good. It helped the products out. And then eventually Roland, they created their own YouTube channel. And at the time, I was working with the tech support team at Roland in kind of laying it out and how it needed to function. And then I began, putting content there on the Roland channel and on my own. And in the midst of all that, then the community themselves, obviously those guys went and then they created MV Nation. Yeah. And so, I knew that the MV was a really great product, but I also knew that it was highly misunderstood. It was way ahead of its time. And I knew that people weren't going to really understand everything that it could do right from the get-go, and that video content was going to be key in helping people understand how the MV functioned, in comparison to the MPC and what it could do for them. And so I began uploading all my content, and I just made sure that I was constantly on MV Nation, answering questions, because the fact of the matter was, when you went to a Guitar Center, I don't know, it was very, very, I could probably count on one hand, like, if I remember, one or two sales guys that actually knew how to demo the MV. But I would say 9 out of 10 times, somebody goes to a Guitar Center or a Sam Ash, to go check out the MV. Number one, a lot of times the demos were all wiped out, or the machine was all messed up. Nobody maintained it. And then sometimes I would sit there on the weekends. I would just kind of walk in, but I wouldn't be in Roland clothing or anything. I would just kind of have a hat on and I would kind of just see, like, I want to see what the salesmen do if somebody asks about some of these Roland products. And every time that somebody was there, and they would ask a question about the MV, the guys wouldn't know anything. Oh yeah, it's it's really cool drum machine, like sampler and stuff. But let me go see if I can find some more information or find somebody, and then they wouldn't come back. And they would leave the customer there, and it's like, that's pretty stupid. Like, that could be a potential $2,000 sale, and you, because you're lazy. Yeah. And you don't want to take the time to learn the products that you sell, meaning everything that's on the sales floor.
Yeah.
You basically walked away and left that customer hanging, and it would just piss me off, because I came from Guitar Center. I worked there for several years on the sales floor, and I actually enjoyed what I did. And it didn't take me much to sell stuff, and I made sure that I knew every product that we had on the sales floor, so much so that, at the time when you worked at Guitar Center, you were either part of the keyboard department or you were part of the pro audio department, but you couldn't sell out of both. So if you were one or the other, then those were the only products that you were allowed to sell. And so, because I got so into the gear and into selling, and I just loved all the stuff, I wasn't that sales guy like, oh, I'm trying to get you to sell it because I want commission. I genuinely loved helping people put together their music studios and getting them the gear, that they needed. Not that would make me the most money, but what they actually needed. I was always of the mentality, like, it's cool. Like, I just want to get them set up with what is going to make them happy. And if I do that, that person will come back to you no matter what. If you lead them down the right road, you don't have to worry about making money off of them, because just be honest and help them out. They will come back, and they always did. So that's all I did. So I just made sure that I knew every single product, and to the point of where I was probably one of the only people that was allowed to sell out of the entire store. Because I learned about all these products, and I would start putting together big studios, and I would go to the other departments. And I'm like, this, and this. And I would just sell it, and people loved it. So going back to, the original thing is, like, the guys did not want to take the time to learn these machines. And, when I was on the sales floor, if there was no customers, I was sitting down with new pieces of music, new pieces of gear that was there, and learning about how they functioned. I was listening to the demos and looking at how the demos were put together, just to understand what the machine was, so that if I got a question about it, I could answer it and I could sell it.
That's a great one. Because, well, that's, to be honest, that is how I learned to work with the MV, was exactly what you're what you're saying about studying the demo songs, because the demo songs, they give so much information about how the song is created, and real facts. You're talking about, I see it also in the chat that people are saying that you're talking about facts. This is absolutely completely true, what you're saying. Meanwhile, I see so many people coming in. Mike 4000, Marcos Pita also, very cool, and Alfonso Caballero. Yeah, you can hear it also on the last names all over the world. So cool. You know what? Because people would like to know a lot of things, and I received a lot of questions. I put up this poll on Facebook, which was a recommendation of Bakerman. He said, Roger, put on a poll and people can put their questions on it, which is awesome. But okay, I know you've answered already this question in Gear Chat, and I told you before I was today on a trip, and I used the 1 hour and a half trip to listen again to your Gear Chat with Jim's thought, which what I told you before. I keep on learning when I hear those chats between you and Jim. But the main question is, will be there a follow-up of the MV-8800? That's what we want to know in general.
Here's the roll. No.
No, it's a big no. Well, Marcos Apita asked me also. He said people have waiting for the MV-9000, or give it a name. But is the Roland Phantom 6 version 3.0 not now the new MV? And I don't know anything about the Phantom series.
Yeah, I can look. There's not going to be another MV, unfortunately. And what I'm going to tell you guys right now, I mean, this is probably going to answer, a few questions, kind of all in one shot.
Okay.
The MV, when it was designed, it was a combination between Roland, obviously, and there was another company that was involved in making or designing the sequencer. For everything that was going to function on the MV. And, as we went, the first revision that came in when the MV-8000 came out, version 1.0, the way that it functioned at that stage was horrible. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. It didn't make any sense. And so once I was brought in and I was able to work with the team and start going through, because they were basically the sales and everything, it just wasn't gonna work. The way that the sequencer was kind of set up and everything, it was pretty bad. Mm-hmm. So we literally had to sit down, and as I was going through it, I remember telling the product manager at the time, and relaying information back to Japan, was that, look, if obviously the way that this machine looks, it is 100% going after the MPC market.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. But if you are going to do that, then the only way that you're going to be able to convert somebody over from one machine that they love to death, that has a long history, it is legendary within the hip-hop world, then it needs to be a smooth crossover, meaning this new machine has to function and do things that are in a similar way that their older machines did, so that they can understand how this machine functions. And in the version 1.0, when the 8000 came out, it was nowhere near that. I couldn't even figure out like how this thing was working and stuff. It really didn't make any sense. And I remember my son, my wife and I were pregnant, and my son was being born. And I remember I was at the hospital for a few days with the 8000 on headphones while my wife's in the bed, she's sleeping. And I'm literally going through the 8000 and I'm jotting down all the functions of, it needs to do this, it should probably do this. I remember doing diagrams and everything and just listing out all these things.
Yeah.
And then submitting that back. And I think it obviously started, the conversations of redesigning the operating system, and that's when we were looking at what version 2.0, was going to do. And over time, between myself, a few other, Roland team members, like I believe Dan Krischer, contributed. You got guys like Jim Stout, myself, the product manager at the time was Jim Norman when the 8000 first came out. But then when Jim left, then Vince LaDuca came in. And I think because Vince, he came from a production background, and Vinny owned like a MPC 60 and a 3000, I think. And he still had them at his house. So Vinny, that a lot of people didn't know, Vinny had a engineering background and actually used to be the engineer for Eazy-E of NWA.
Mm-hmm.
So Vinny had a lot of experience with bringing in MPCs into the studio and getting them set up and everything for sessions. So I think between myself, Vinny, and other Roland is where we collectively put in all of our ideas in what the MV really needed to be in order to be a successful Roland product.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
Awesome. Yeah. Man. Okay, so there won't be a follow-up. And I
I'm sorry, and just one thing, kind of go off the rails sometimes.
It's no problem. I'm familiar with that.
So one of the reasons why you will not see another MV is since Roland did not design the actual sequencer and everything, it was designed by another company. That is exactly why you won't see another MV. I don't know who the company is. I never dealt with them. I don't know the names. I wasn't privy, to that information. I just remember submitting information that was relayed to that company. But that what makes the MV its magic is a combination of things. Okay, it is the S700, S750 sampling engine that is in it. That is one thing.
Yeah.
The converters that are in it are another thing. And then, of course, the operating system and the sequencer. That's, where all that magic is.
Correct.
You can't have another MV if you're missing one of those things. Then it's not an MV.
Correct.
It just isn't. So after, I want to say around 2007 or 8, maybe, I remember having discussions, with the R&D team from Japan. And I remember sitting down at a table with Vinny, and Vinny was like, all right, let's go have a chat. Japan sent us some mock-ups, for a potentially new MV. And so, okay, cool. And so I looked at the mock-ups and the design. It looked really cool. I was like really excited. And so then, but I already knew, I was like, okay, so internally, the sequencer, what are we looking at? And it wasn't going to be the same sequencer. They basically wanted to put like the sequencer from, I think like maybe the Phantom X, at the time. And I was like, no, not doing that. That's not an MV then.
Oh.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not going to function the same. It's not going to do anything the same. It's not going to sound like, no. It's not even the same sampler engine. So no, like it just call it something else, but it's not. That's not an MV.
No.
And I can't get behind like I'm not gonna do that. No. And so Vince went back and told them, well, it needs to have this and this. We need to do this and this. Otherwise, I don't think so. And then they just scrapped it. They're like, nope, they didn't do it. And that's kind of where we left off from there. I think talks came up again several years later after that. I wasn't even with the company anymore. And I believe somebody from Roland reached out to me and, they wanted to have a discussion about it. And again, my main question is, I don't care about what it looks like. I don't want to see pictures, nothing. All I'm going to ask you is it the same sequencer from the company that designed it? If it's not, the conversation's over and there's nothing to talk about. Like, it's not going to be an MV and I'm not going to have anything to do with it. And he was like, okay, well, it's not.
We're done.
And we're done.
My. So, but okay, I see in the background, I see the first lap, the MV1, but it carries the MV letters, but for sure it doesn't have at all the sequencer, but yeah, I made a video last year when the MV came out, when the MV1 came out, to do a kind of comparison between the MV-8800 and the MV1. And for me, it's of course it's not the follow-up. But then I realized I never knew that, but there's also this MV50 or MV80. Which one is it? And then do you know one of these machines? The MV50. Yes, it's the MV50 with some sliders on it and a sequencer and some built-in sounds. I thought it's the MC80 with built-in sounds. And then I thought, okay, it's just the MV is just a way for Roland to use some typical line of product, because do you know what MV stands for?
That was taken from. I remember asking about that, and
meanwhile, Nick Danger says it's MV30. Thank you, Mick. Nick Danger is MV30. Yeah,
MV30. Okay, so yeah, and that's pretty much because it was sequencer based, like in a box.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of taking from that and building the next big version of that. That's typically what they do. Is those first two letters will usually come from whatever the lineage is of one of the first, like the MC, like the groove boxes. Okay, so you had the MC303, MC808, MC909, the MC307, and all of those groove boxes had MC, and
Correct.
So MC is microcomposer. And so the MC comes from the very first microcomposers that they had, and that's where it derived from, So, yeah,
that's where it derived from. Yeah, it's correct. I'm a totally fan of the SP808. That's where I started with the SP808 in 2007, and then today I heard also that you were talking about that the SP808 was an example. Well, it was the one of the startups for the MV-8000 in your during Gear Chat, and that's the reason. Well, I started with the SP808. Yeah, I'm pointing that way because it's over there, and then because of people from the community said, "Well, Roger, why don't you try the MV?" And I tried the MV-8000, and I was totally in love with that machine. And so you also said to me that the SP808 was, the little brother. How can you say it?
It's the SP is a completely different line of products, and the SP808, that line of product has obviously been really, really popular in the lo-fi beat making, community for the longest time. And for good reason. The SP808, and same thing like with the SP303 and the SP404, which is probably the most iconic sampler from that line, from the SP lines.
Correct.
The SPs have a very unique tone and sound to them, and the timing on them is also very unique. And the reason for that is that the SPs, they didn't use your typical MIDI sequencer. It wasn't a MIDI sequencer that was in there. It's phrase-based. So that's what the SP stands. I believe that's what SP stands for, is sampling phrase.
Sampling phrase.
So
of
it's
course.
so when you have phrases, then it's not MIDI. That's not the way that it's basically looking like at points in time is where a phrase is placed, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so that's why if
correct.
you notice the quantize on the SPs is never, it's not like MIDI quantize.
No.
And so because it's phrase based and you're literally think of it this way. This is the best way I can explain it. Ableton Live, you're in a linear sequencer, okay?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of producers that, when they're working with samples, they just put the samples directly on the timeline. They don't use a sampler to trigger it. They don't use me. They just drop it right onto the timeline. One of the guys that I first saw doing that, I believe was, I don't know if it was Ronnie Size or somebody else. It was a drum and bass producer, and that's what he would do. He would just put all of his samples on the timeline, and that's how he would sequence and do all of his tracks within Pro Tools. And this was before Pro Tools never had MIDI. So so you could think of the SPs kind of the same way. It's like you're taking a phrase of an audio and you're putting it on a specific point in time, but it's not MIDI locked. There's no MIDI happening there. And so when you would quantize, the quantize is kind of just moving by jagged movements, thinking that, all right, I'm going to nudge it over here a bit, but it's not really extremely accurate like the way MIDI is. And so with the SPs, that's why you would get that, like these weird quantizes and time shifts that, it just had this real funky, and that's why the hip hop and lo-fi community love it.
That's the reason. Okay. Because I call myself the MIDI Maniac, and I must admit, by starting the live streams, I started exploring the audio tracks because I never used them, and then I noticed how cool it is to work with audio tracks and with indeed the using the sample phrases, and so. Can you say that the audio tracks are almost the same like how SPs work with phrases?
Yes. Very much so.
Very much, yeah.
Because essentially, audio tracks, even when you record it in real time, it's being recorded to RAM. It doesn't record directly to the disc. So everything that you do on the MV is RAM based. So when you're recording a live audio track, that is getting put into the RAM. And then when you're playing it back, it's accessing it off of the RAM. And so that's why I ended up doing a video where if you work with long phrases, and I mean really, really long, like vocal phrases, like say it's all an entire song, even if you cut the vocal phrase perfectly, like on the one, you just got to drop it on the one, it will not stay locked to tempo by the time you get to the song, to the end of the song. And you could think of that as kind of like you hit play on the sequencer, and then you also are hitting play on, let's say, like what's the best way to do it? Like if you were hitting play on the turntable and you're playing like, the song, so you're playing them together, and over time, sometimes it can drift.
It can drift away.
It just drifts.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's playing it back from RAM, and it only starts from the one start point.
Correct.
So
you're not able to correct it. Meanwhile,
right? It has no way later on down the song to lock the sample to a position because it only remembers it starting on the one from the beginning. So yeah, you're gonna have natural drift, of time where it starts to drift a little bit because it's not staying locked to any points in time, only from the beginning. So the way that I figured out how to fix that was lay down the vocal track all the way through, and then go to different points in time and just put a split in the region. And when you would split that region, that would act as a trigger.
Yeah.
And it would keep it locked in time. And that was the workaround for that.
Yeah, you did that video with a sample from who?
From Marvin Gaye.
From Marvin Gaye, yeah, you did that. I still don't know how to make that cut, but Bakerman will tell it me, and you also. I will check your video again because
I can tell you guys here how to do it. It's easy.
Okay. Great. You've got your MV over there, and if it's easy to show, then I will switch the screen.
All right. Let me see if you guys can see that.
Yeah,
you would have to switch my screen.
I've switched your screen, and we see all now the VGA screen and your
All right.
Small over there.
Okay, so the way that this would work, and please forgive me if it's been a while since I've done this.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
So the way that I did it was I would highlight a little section like this with the mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, dang it. It's highlighting the whole thing. Hold on. Maybe it's... All right, let's see. I know I'm missing a step. There's something else that I'm supposed to do.
Perhaps I see people phrase split. Does Beat says phrase split?
Like basically, like I would select this little section like this, but there's something I'm missing. It's with having to edit. Is it this one?
You have to change the select tool, Mike.
Yeah.
Does Beats? Thank you so much. The select tool, it's on the left, I guess, over there. Instead of having the pointer, you will have to use the select tool. It's turn grid off. Elevation Productions Granddaddy Frost says turn grid off. It's the square icon on the left. Yeah, it's a square next to the eraser. Instead of having the arrow, you need to have the select.
Let's see. All right, I had to move it back because I accidentally moved it. I wish I had a little pop-over menu because I can't remember all of the...
Jason Shannon says now a great stream, but this gonna drive up the price up another $1,000 of the MV. No. We make sure that it will not happen because I've instructed Mike. Please, Mike, make mistakes. Don't make it as natural as you really are. So make mistakes and make it sound awful. Then the price will drop to $250. Oh.
Man, I cannot remember what the hell.
Oh, I just want to take your pointer and put it over there. let me do a screen. No.
You can't remember where it's at. I know that there's a specific mode that I have to.
Yeah, it's okay. I tell you, go with your. No, it's.
No, there was something that I would switch on here. I can't remember what it was.
Left. People say left. Go to the left. Go left.
Oh,
left. Yeah. Over there. Oh no, next to the eraser. Between the pointer and the eraser. That's the one. Yes. Applause. Meanwhile, we can sing for several people are having their birthday today. But
there we go. All right. So you got the selection tool here.
The selection.
And then once you have that, then you can right click on it. And you can just do either cut.
That's the one. Okay.
And there it is.
No.
So you see that line?
Yeah.
That's how you put. So if this track was going on for 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Like that's where you would put, little cuts throughout the entire track. And that's what would keep the vocal in sync. If it's one long vocal phrase, that's the trick to do that.
Okay, I'm learning here because people said it already to me, and because of what's happening in the chat, I'm learning here also. So okay, it's that selection tool, and then as you say, you can make cuts to make to prevent that the audio phrase will drift away.
Right.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Great to know.
Yeah. So again, I know it took me a while.
This is the
mode you're in. Yeah. So this is the mode you're in. You come right here where you have your pointer, and you're going to do the selection tool here, the little square box.
Yeah.
Then you come to a little section is all you need.
Mm-hmm.
Highlight it, and then right click, cut. And then you'll see that it puts a little split there. You're basically splitting the region. That split acts as a marker to trigger it.
Okay, because first the people were the community is applauding for for the fact that you found that you found the right tool.
Sorry about that. Man, there's something else that I used to do. I can't remember.
But I see from Dustbeats, he said I do that too, but the phrase gets shortened unfortunately, and I don't. But I have a workaround for it. Okay, but is it true that it shortens the audio phrase, or
I've never had a problem with it shortening the audio phrase because you're not changing the length of anything. You're not changing the positioning. You're simply, instead of it just being one region, you're basically you're splitting it into two regions. And so what happens is when the playhead is running over and it sees it, it's kind of like, think of it like if you're DJing, where you kind of nudge your hand.
Correct. Yeah.
That's what that little split does. It basically locks it and nudges it back into the correct time of where it should be.
Correct. Okay, that's what you're doing right there. Cool. Well, I thought I had also this kind of question. Well, no. Because I sorry, because we have now the VGA screen, but you were telling about you started with the VGA screen, telling us that it has been a while. It has been a while that you have done this. Because people also wanted to know, in this case, Hayden Redcliffe asked, do you still have an MV and regularly, that's a difficult word for me, regularly use an MV? So, based on that question, yeah, you don't use it all the time. But what happened with your MV? Because you had this MV for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still use the MV, but it's obviously it's kind of on a case by case basis. Really just depends on what I'm working on and the type of sound and the feel that I'm going for. That's really all it's about. But I rarely ever use the VGA, just because, being on the road with it, back then, there were times where I would, I'd have this big case, for the MV, but I would also sometimes have to carry another, soft bag that had the VGA monitor in it, because a lot of times when I would show up to a store or somewhere, the VGA, number one, was a very big part of selling it. Like, people really, there wasn't anything else out there that did that. So it was because it was at the time when, plugins and, computers and, digital DAWs were really big, and people were already, transitioning out of complete hardware-based studios and going more in the box with software. It was perfect because it gave you the sense of being in like a computer environment with a mouse where you could click and find things very easily instead of having to navigate with buttons through a small window. Yeah, you could have it on a nice big monitor, and it made things easier. But for me, because I had to travel with all that stuff sometimes, I didn't want to be somewhere where I didn't have a VGA monitor and then not know how to access or do some of the functions that I would do in my demos with the VGA. I needed to learn and be just as quick without the VGA. So I then started just working completely on the MV by itself without the VGA so that I could understand where all the functions were, how to access them. And pretty soon, like I knew where everything was, and I got so good at just being in the, on the screen that I never connected the VGA anymore. So I would still show it, but then, I would have guys that said, I don't want to have a computer screen, so can we just cool. I would disconnect it and then boom, 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 boom. I would show them how to do it all in here, and it was great.
Correct.
So there's I'd say probably 80% of everything, 85% of everything that I do on the MV, I can easily do from the screen. I'd say there's probably only like 10%, 15% of functions that are definitely easier with the VGA, but it doesn't mean that you can't do them or access them without it. It's probably just an additional step and some more button pushing, but it's totally doable. And honestly, I prefer it because when I decide to work on the MV, I love being hands-on. I don't want to have my hands on a mouse and looking and clicking on a screen. I want to be on a hard, dedicated surface and looking just at my window here and just kind of doing things, bam, 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 bam. Like if I'm going to work on hardware, that's what I want. I don't want to pretend like I'm in a computer environment. That's the whole point of me going to hardware, is to get out of that environment.
Correct. Yeah. I totally agree with that because during the streams I use the MV with the buttons and not with the mouse, and people also say, well, Roger, it's you can use the mouse, but the feeling of hands-on gives me more connection with the unit, and I noticed that I also understand better how the machine works because the machine contains so much, and with the hands-on, with the ability of using your hands on the machine, the connection is getting even better. And perhaps you didn't see it, but I uploaded last Friday after we did the test. I uploaded a video about replacing the LCD of the MV because I found in the service notes the actual part number, but the part number was just on the last 3 digits. It was different, and I bought one from China with complete number correct, but the last 3 digits did not match. But man, wow, it works. So it's super cool for all the people who are still working with the MV-8800 but having problems with the LCD screen. You still can replace it. It's 2022 and you still can replace it. I offered $50 and it was replaced for. It's super easy. Just to screw some connectors and it was replaced. Super easy. So I totally understand you that working with the internal LCD is also very very nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Is this MV? Was this your original MV or?
No. So I had at the time when I left Roland, I had 2 MVs. And at the time that I left Roland, it obviously, the US was going through a recession. And so every music company was having to, downsize their staff. It was pretty bad. Mm-hmm. So obviously when I ended up leaving the company, I had 1 MV. I had 2 of them. One of them, I believe I was allowed to keep. I don't really remember, but I just remember I had to return one of the MVs that I had, and so I returned it. And because times were tough, I basically had to sell off, some gear and stuff because, I was pretty much just going to contract for a while because I really couldn't, go and just work with another music company because all music companies were, getting hit hard by the recession, and all of the music companies had downsized their staff. So everybody was like getting cut or put onto contract, or whatever. And so, because it was, that sort of time, I ended up selling it off to keep money in the bank for emergency purposes, just in case.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure what was going to happen or what I would end up doing. So, I didn't have an MV for a very long time. And it wasn't until I moved out to Colorado in 2015. And when I got out there, at the time, Jim Stout was out there, and we had just finished doing a bunch of work for Beatport at the time, and so we then began working and doing stuff for ADSR, and we were talking about, doing the gear chat type of thing. And, Jim was really into talking about gear. I love talking about gear, but like that guy, you want to get into synthesizers and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's really, really cool to talk to him about that stuff because he knows a lot. And especially with a lot of the Roland synths and everything, like he's really well versed on the history on a lot of the machines and everything. So I learned a lot from him on stuff because there were certain things that I didn't know. And he would, tell me, oh, well, this and this and this. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome. But yeah, so, Jim's idea of doing this gear chat thing for ADSR, I thought it was cool. He's like, we should just do something where we're just talking openly about, just really great products, products that have stood the test of time and to this day, still play a major role in music production. So I thought it was great. I was like, cool. And I was like, damn, I wish I had an MV, because I know that it's still popular and I know that there's still a lot of people using it. But at the time, I couldn't find one. They were really expensive if you were to find one that was used. Mm-hmm. But there really wasn't too many on the used market. I think I was like, wow, people must be catching on to what the MV, is capable of, and they're snatching them all up because I was seeing a lot of posts where guys were buying 2 of them.
I know. There are people in the community who have 2. J Pro channel has 2 also. It's amazing, yeah.
So, anybody out there in the chat, if you've got 2, put a number 2. I want to see. I'm curious to see how many people have 2 of them. But yeah. There was people that were buying 2 of them, and some guys were like, I'm looking for a 3rd one. And it was just pretty crazy. So, with all of that, I kind of felt like I probably wasn't going to be able to, be able to get one that was going to be in, really good condition and, for a decent price. Because I remember at one point, I was seeing MVs on the used market for probably $300-$400. Because people didn't understand them, and so they were basically getting rid of them.
Mike, check out. Bram has 3. F Magic 2000 Able 2. Dust Beats 2. Waxted, I got 3. J Pro Channel, I got 2. Man, Hayden, Radcliffe Hayden, I have 8. 4 of each. No way. No. Nah. Man, I feel so poor with only 1. If this one dies, I'm so totally fucked up.
Yeah. Damn.
My.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Is like I couldn't find one anywhere.
Yeah.
It was really impossible to try and find one. So, I finally one day, I think we had done a few gear chats by that point. And, Jim was like, you should probably just check, check on Reverb or something like that. And then maybe you'll find one. So I was like, okay, cool. So, I started looking at Reverb and I had never really used Reverb before, so wasn't too sure. And I found one on there, and the MV that was on there, it had the MV-8800 expansion card on it. And I was like, wow.
The Holy Grail. Oh,
that's the Holy Grail. It's got the expansion. It's got everything on it. It had expanded RAM, everything. So I was like, and I wasn't too worried about the RAM because I still had, extra RAM sitting around. Like I kept all that stuff because, as you well know, that sometimes, classic samplers and things, trying to find EPROMs and things like that, it's a rarity. So I already knew that the RAM and everything, would probably be something that would be difficult to come by in another 10, 20 years. So I just kept it. And so I saw it, and I forgot how much the guy wanted for it. But either way, like I thought it was still a cool price because I knew that the output expander alone could probably get sold for that price by itself.
Wow.
But the guy wanted like it wasn't cheap, you know. Like the guy wanted like a good chunk of money for it. So I emailed the guy on Reverb, and I explained who I was, and actually no, I didn't. I just emailed him, and I asked him a few questions, and I asked if he'd be willing to negotiate or maybe just drop the price a little bit, you know. And so the guy responded, and he's like, "Are you the same Mike Acosta, like from like Roland, like the MV guy?
Are you the real Mike?
Are you that Mike Acosta?" And so I responded back to him, and I said, "Yeah, that's me. I'm currently I'm living out in Colorado, and we're doing this thing on Gear Chat, and I need to get a hold of an MV so that I can talk about it and feature it on that show." And so he responded, and he was like, "You know what?" He goes, "I'll give it to you for this amount, no problem." He goes, "I would be honored for you to take my MV." He goes, I'm glad. He goes, "I don't really want to get rid of it, but I have to. There's some financial things, but," he goes, I feel better knowing that it's going to go to you." He's also, "I have no problem. I will take this for it." He goes, "Go ahead and take it." He goes, "I'm happy that you're taking it." He goes, "This is awesome." So yeah, so I got it for a good price, and he shipped it out to me. And when I got it, he actually sent it in the travel case. So I got the travel bag, the soft travel case for it.
Wow.
And the original manual, the CDs, everything was in there. And
immaculate.
And obviously the MV, it had the output expander card on it and everything. So the only thing that I ended up doing was I swapped out the pads just because I have a thing about germs, and somebody's touching it. I just wanted a new set of pads. So one of the guys I spoke to at, I believe it was MPC Stuff, I was talking to them, and they was like, "Yeah, I got you, dude. I'll send you some new glow in the dark pads that we made for the MV." He goes, "But they're a little different." They have like a bluish tint to them. And I was like, "All right, cool." So he sent them, and that's what you see here. It's got like
it's beautiful.
Like a metallic blue. Yeah. And so it goes really good with the silver.
Wow.
On the MV. But when you turn out the light and everything, then these pads actually glow. So they're not white. They have a sky blue kind of look to them. But when the lights go out, then they turn like fluorescent green and stuff. It's really cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
But either way, I still have to take the MV in because on certain pads, like the triggers, like this pad number 6 here, there's certain ones that they trigger funny, and I know that the contacts aren't like right on. So I know that I have to probably have all that stuff replaced.
Are those contacts not still available through MPC Stuff? I don't know. Me neither.
I don't know how to solder or do any of that.
No.
Stuff.
It's very easy. I don't know if you have the jumpy sliders. I
haven't had the problem with the sliders.
Then you're lucky, and let it be like that. And I did a replacement of 4 sliders, and I took the complete MV out of his shell, and in the end it's very easy. It's just it's a sheet, a contact sheet what you have to replace. And I thought I saw it on MPC Stuff. I don't know. And it was also a question from Anthony B. He asked on YouTube, what's up with the skeleton buttons? And I don't know what the skeleton buttons are. Do you know what those buttons are?
Skeleton buttons. I don't know if it's just a nickname for the type of buttons that these are, that they named them that way. I don't know. I don't know what skeleton buttons are.
No. Okay, me neither. I thought, well, perhaps it's the plastic inside between the pads and the knobs and the real PCB.
I mean, I'll tell you this, and this is a long-running joke. I mean, that a lot of us, from Roland, I mean, we all knew. And basically, it was We had this joke that Roland back in Japan, they had the barrel of knobs and buttons and everything, and they would just pull from those barrels, and and that's why you would see a lot of the same knobs and sliders and the buttons from many of their products. And so, but I understood like why that happened. I didn't particularly agree with it, but I understood why. And when I was in Japan, um, at the Hamamatsu R&D Center, there is a room on the second floor, and when you go in there, it's literally like there's a big room, and then inside that room is another room that has like these glass walls all around it, and it is very much like if you've ever seen the stock exchange, like when they give you video feeds from the stock exchange and people are in there bidding on. Okay, that's what that room is in Roland. They literally have a room in there where they have salespeople and bidders that are in there, and basically they are buying these pieces at a certain cost, and they buy them in bulk.
No way.
No way. So like these buttons here, if they can get them for fractions, like on a penny, then what they'll do is they'll buy a huge amount of them because they'll utilize them over multiple products. So it's a way to save, on costs, and it totally makes sense. That if you buy things in bigger, you get them cheaper. So that's why with a lot of the Roland products, you would see certain products for at least 5 to 10 years would all have kind of like the same buttons until a new product comes out, and then that new product has all these new buttons and new finish. Then you'll see the products that come out after that product for the next 10 years will probably all feature somewhat of the same buttons.
Yeah, you're totally right. I'm looking now at my VM-3100 Pro, my VS-2480, and the MV-8800, and they all have the same sliders, the same knobs.
Yeah.
And also the SP808. Yes, correct.
Yep.
So that's the reason. Okay. And meanwhile, people in the chat have answered regarding the skeleton buttons. The skeleton buttons are the full hard plastic buttons. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Okay. And okay, so Japan had this room to buy them in bulk to prevent the high costs on their machines.
Yeah, and then to also, there's continuity amongst the products, so that also makes sense, because when you look at a bunch of Roland products from a particular era, you will notice that they all have similar buttons, faders, pads,
correct,
sliders, and so there's continuity amongst all of those products. So even though they all may have a different look and they do something different, there is continuity amongst them, meaning that they have certain buttons, pads, faders, and things like that. That is obviously the Roland brand,
Yeah, so. Cool. Okay. I see in the chat, Keys by me is saying Mike is dropping all the inside intel. Well, do you mind, Mike? Because last Friday you sent me pictures of your visit in Japan to the Roland Museum, which is a totally secret place for everybody who's not involved with Roland. In fact, you told me that even if you are involved at Roland, then still it's not accessible for most of the employees.
Yeah. I mean, the R&D center in Hamamatsu is probably like the core central of Roland Japan, and that is pretty much where all of the different Roland companies from all over the world will meet there at the Hamamatsu R&D Center to take a look at the new products that are going to be coming out. And presentations there are usually done for the company and for the inside of the company. And that's, where a lot of the really great, products get developed. They have different centers. So there's different Roland R&D centers. Like some products are made in the factory in Italy. And those products may be more of the high-end pianos because of the type of keys and those kinds of things. So those may get manufactured at an Italy factory or something. And I'm just saying, and like, I'm not saying that that's exactly what gets manufactured over there. I'm just saying that they have different factories all around the world, and they all specialize in certain things. And so certain products get sent to be manufactured in those particular factories. And so the Hamamatsu R&D Center is kind of like the main core one. And they usually host, a lot of events there for obviously certain special guests and things like that, but a lot of the internal, the companies and things like that. And so they have the big Roland Museum that's there. And obviously, if you're invited to go there, and there's a lot of people that come from other companies that get invited to go there, and it is a massive, massive, massive room. I don't even want to say room. I want to say a hall.
It's a hall.
It's a hall of pretty much every Roland product that has ever been made, including the very, very, very first product that Mr. Kakehashi made when Roland was not even Roland. Roland was called Acetone.
Acetone, of course.
Yep, and that was Mr. Kakehashi's company.
No way.
That when he started, and then from there is what got turned into Roland. But Acetone was the first ever Roland product was under Acetone.
This is amazing.
But you could totally show the pictures.
Yeah, okay, I will do it. And I'm going to use, I'm going to use Pig's Jam. People think of course, people think it's cheesy. Okay, perhaps it's cheesy, but I like to use Pig's Jam in this case. I will put you over here. Wait a minute. You are now over there. Zoom. I will place you over here. Can you change the scene to your the scene where we have only your face?
Yeah, let's go here. There we go.
Great. Then I will adjust it, and then you're also on screen. So okay, this is cool. First picture is in Japanese, the door, and with your name, Mr. Michael Acosta. Very cool. Then we see you over here now with MC-808s. Oh, how many of them are there? And MC-909 also? 1, 2, 3.
So I was there. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. But that's an MC-909 there because, okay, so I was working on the development of the MC-808. And that particular day, we were trying to decide on the color of the LCD screen. And I'm not sure if you can see, but there's one there that's in front of me, and it's orange, which is the one that it came out with.
Correct. One is orange, yeah.
And to the left of that, you can kind of see it's in like an indigo blue.
That's correct. I can zoom in.
Yeah, and so we had, and then there was like white, and so basically, a lot of people obviously wanted, something different. They were tired of, skeleton buttons and the same orange, color scheme of the screens. But at that time, I don't think that the LED colors or that were available, were that great at the time, or maybe they just didn't have ones that would work really well. But once I looked at all the different color options, I ended up just sticking with the orange because the orange was the easiest to be able to see the black text against it in a low light environment. When I was testing it with like indigo blue, the black would somehow kind of get mixed with the shading of the indigo blue, and so it didn't make the text look crisp. And even though it looked kind of cool, the one thing that, we had to keep in mind was that the MC-808 was a performance piece, meaning that this was meant to be used, live on stage and for performances, which is why it had the motorized faders and all those things. And that's what all of the groove boxes were meant to do, the MCs. Those were all meant for live jamming on stage. And so, because of that, you have to take into consideration that when you're live on stage, you're going to be in low light environments most of the time.
Correct.
Even
Yeah.
if you have moving lights on stage, it's not a constant thing unless you're going to have a light right there. But you're going to be in a low light environment, so you're going to want to have something that reads very easy in low light. And so based on that is why I made the decision with the rest of the engineers to just let's roll with the orange. I think that's going to be the best bet, because I was even one of those advocating for a different color until I saw it and I was like, yeah, no, it's not going to work.
Cool.
And so and that is one of the R&D rooms there, and my job in there is pretty much going through the process of making a beat, working on the synthesizers, all that kind of stuff, and then diagramming the workflow process. And as I'm going through the workflow process, I need to jot down any sort of bugs or things that I don't like in the workflow process, and then write down what should be happening at this point here versus what's happening now. And then at the end of every day, the engineers would come in, we sit down there, we look at the diagrams that I did for that day, and then they take that back, and then they go and work. And then the next day when I would come in, they would have an update in the software, and I would have to go through that process again and then see if it's working properly and making sense.
Cool. Yeah, I'm showing now the some whiteboards with some notifications of the research and development. Because of course we know all you from promoting the MV, but for sure most of us we don't realize how much work it is to create a product like in this case the MV.
Right.
So yeah, I see now song mode, pattern mode, song mode. Because on the picture also with the MC-808s, we saw Phantom X in the back and also in the MV behind you, right?
Yes.
Cool.
I'm trying to look at right now I see the diagrams are up, but yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it is. That diagram that's up there, you really have to kind of diagram. Basically, what has to happen is myself and other guys, we have to diagram what we think you guys will be doing in your workflow of creating music on that machine. We have to go through different scenarios of how somebody would use that and diagram it all out for the engineers, because engineers are just engineers. Most of them don't make music.
Yeah.
So you have to basically list out step by step what the process is going to be for a music producer, so that they can understand how to code the software correctly and what needs to happen. And you have to keep all of this stuff so that you know exactly, if you find a bug, you got to know at what point in that workflow does that bug pop up, and what exactly is causing it, and what do we need to do to get around that and make that work. And it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, I can imagine. It's because still up to today, I know that people are asking why didn't you add more multiple outputs or digital in without using the MV8 OP1 or so many things. But I assume it's a lot of work and right to have all those things implemented. Okay. I have now a picture from the Roland Museum. It's the SH101. Cool. Bed number 7 has. This is total overview. I see drums. I see the old school heavy D drum kit, the triangle ones. And this is all the museum of Roland.
Yeah, and you can see there's like glass windows that go into another
correct.
room.
Yeah.
So it's really huge. Like it's massive. And it has every product that they've made in there, from obviously the Roland products. You have Boss products that are in there.
Mm-hmm.
You have Edirol products that are
correct.
in there.
Pro. Yeah.
And you also have CK products that are in there as well.
CK.
And yeah, so CK was contemporary keyboards, and that was Roland's more boutique, top of the line, grand pianos and things like that. That was it. The division isn't there anymore. They changed it. But before there was a separate Roland division called CK, and that was more of the contemporary pianos, like the grand pianos that would go into a home and those kinds of things.
Wow.
Yeah. And so a lot of those products are in there as well.
Super cool. Now we're watching at the Jupiter 6 and Jupiter 8 machines. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
super nice, super, and they look so virgin, right?
Yeah. Yep. These are, those are some of the original ones.
Totally
and
untouched.
Yeah, and they've been encased, in plexiglass. So yeah, I mean, man, I'm
Wow.
telling you, when I was there, every time when I would be walking in there, it was just like drooling over everything. Like, oh my god, man, you can't touch anything. Everything's sealed up in like I said, plexiglasses. Some stuff is out, and they have an original System 100 there, a complete System 100.
A complete one.
Yeah. So it's a massive modular wall. It's a full-on System 100 there.
That's
and it's just
amazing.
like, wow.
I see in the chat, keys by me. I was one of the beta testers for MV-OS 1.01. Ask Mike why we could never get a scrolling cursor in the simple edit screen. This was there was also a question in from the people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we knew what it needed, but again, what a lot of people don't realize, and it's just like with computers today, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's all, well, why don't they update the MV anymore? Why didn't they add this? Why didn't they do that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's put it this way. Most of you guys have laptops, things that you use for music production. And I'm gonna speak on MacBooks because I've been a Mac user since like '96.
Mm-hmm.
You know that every time that there's an operating system update, at the end of it all, your Mac runs a tad slower, and that's because every time that they're making these new operating systems, they're making these new operating systems based on their newer MacBooks that can handle more processing power, have more RAM, and those kinds of things. That's how they develop this new stuff. They develop it for the future. So they develop it for faster computers because they know that in another year, we're going to have this new MacBook that we're working on, and we'll be able to do this kind of video threads and all this other stuff. So the operating system will be able to handle that stuff. But if you're on an older MacBook that's maybe 5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
Your MacBook is going to slow down a little bit because it doesn't have anywhere near that processing power. And even though you're not using those kinds of applications, the fact that it's embedded into the code, when you're running that operating system, it's still going to tax your CPU a certain way.
Yeah, correct.
And so if you ever notice, that's why on certain MacBooks, you're only allowed to update it to a certain point.
Yeah, correct. I know.
Not all MacBooks will allow you to update to,
Nope.
High Sierra, Catalina, or Monterey.
No.
And the reason for that is, yes, technically your MacBook probably could run Monterey, but it's going to run like complete, absolute crap because it's not optimized. The processor in that particular MacBook is not optimized to run that newer operating system. Okay. So with that being said, it is the same thing with the MV. All of these music, pieces and everything, they're all little computers. They're all running a small little microcomputer inside.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's only so much that the operating system or the DSP on the machine can handle. And so when we got to version 3.5, we already noticed that if you take a look at what the MV was from version 1 up until 3.5, we're talking major overhauls, huge updates. We're not talking about little small things. These are major functions that completely changed the entire machine.
Yeah.
There's no other hardware product that I know of that went through those kinds of big crazy updates, at least like within a sampling, kind of workstation type of deal. It went through a lot. And when we got to 3.5, we already knew that we were kind of maxing out what we could do already. So at that point, we had to make a conscious decision. Do we add these additional things that people want at the cost of the regular functionality possibly suffering or slowing down? Or do we cap it here and say, look, this is the MV, it is fully capable, this is about as much as it's going to do without interfering with its normal day-to-day processes to keep it running at an optimal performance level? And that's the decision we had to make when we got to that point. And so we said, no, we want the MV to still run smooth. And if anything else that we add is going to possibly interrupt that, then no, then we stop at this point. And we all agreed that we should just stop there and leave it alone so that the MV still runs. And that's why to this day, if you take care of your MV, because it's basically a computer with a hard drive. So if you take care of it, it runs completely smooth. It doesn't lag. It's not slowed down or anything. But it is what it is because we capped off, adding more stuff that would possibly hinder the performance a bit. So that's why the MV didn't get any more updates, was because you can't. It's like it was going to start affecting the overall performance. And once you get into that, then it doesn't make any sense to do that. And as far as a scrolling cursor, that was going to require a lot of DSP because you've got a sample playing and then you're updating it. The screen has to refresh a bunch of times every time that waveform is moving. So that's more CPU usage. So do you guys want a scrolling cursor, or do you want 3 or 4 other little editing features that were really important, to the machine? So we had to choose. Correct. So we went with the more functional kind of operations more so than aesthetic, looking at a scrolling cursor. And I understand why, because if you're working with longer samples, obviously to find the spot that you need to put a chop at or where you want to kind of truncate a sample from, I completely understand that a scrolling cursor makes that way easier. But it's not impossible, and if I have a choice between that and other functional things on the MV, I'm going to choose the functionality.
Correct. So, okay, I'm the scrolling cursor. We are talking about the when you have the sample and then you will see the scrolling line, right? Is that the scrolling cursor? Okay, that uses a lot of
it's a lot of DSP because the screen has to refresh
continuously. See, yes, see, yes, totally.
So if we put that in there and then the machine starts slowing down, then everybody's going to be bitching and complaining. Oh, hey, man, the scrolling cursor is making the MV slower now. So, I mean, it's like, and it's like you got to choose one or the other. You can't have it all on one machine like this. No. It's not possible.
Correct. I must admit, I recently I have this V-Synth GT next to me, and I love my original V-Synth and my XT, but I still not attaching much with the GT because it has some issues with MIDI clock, and it's terrible. I cannot use MIDI clock because it uses so much. I think it's DSP power, so I have to disconnect the MIDI clock to make it work nice, and that's something terrible with a machine like this.
The problem with the V-Synth that I found was that a lot of the really cool stuff that it was doing was it's doing it through system exclusive messages, and that's why you get interruptions with the MIDI clock stuff, because there's a lot of system exclusive stuff that is happening. Stuff that we don't even know about. It wasn't until we, I believe it was Jim Stout, that guy is the V-Synth guy. Like, he knows it inside out, like the back of his hand. And I remember I think we were at the Roland office once, and I think we used, it was like an application that can, identify signals that are coming in and letting you know exactly what they were, like what MIDI messages were coming through, because we were trying to figure out how to automate certain things. Like, what if I wanted to switch, the different parallel processes, or what if I wanted to access certain things? And we couldn't figure out why certain things like cutoff, right?
Yeah.
We all know that's typically CC message 67 or somewhere around there is usually where the cutoff is. But it wasn't responding to any of that. So it wasn't until we started using this application to really identify what was happening is where we figured out that a lot of that stuff was actually being done through system exclusive and not MIDI CC.
Yeah.
And that is where it could potentially cause some issues that you would see with clocking and things like that. Because if you were trying to record CC automation and you had MIDI clock going, you have system exclusive trying to override all of that. And that's what happens.
Yeah, it's a lot of data. There's a lot of data going on there.
Big time.
See, yes. See. I go to the next picture. Yeah, I have to show this. Because this is the picture with the CR78. And perhaps, do you know which was the first A-Stone product? I saw it in the. I see it in the chat. Do you know what it was?
I think it was called the Rhythm Ace.
The Rhythm Ace. Oh, okay. People are so Rhythm Ace. So cool. But then I see this Piano Plus 11, and you told me something about this. That the Piano Plus 11 was.
So the Piano Plus that you see right there, that is what originally was designed so the TB303, that product right there, the Piano Plus, that's what the TB303 was originally designed for. It was designed as an accompaniment to that, to provide an analog bass.
Yeah.
And because it had all of the synthesis methods, in it, when piano players heard the TB303, they felt that it didn't sound like a real acoustic bass player, because it was synthesized. So the TB303 and the TR606, those two were meant to go with that Piano Plus. And so obviously it didn't work well, and so they blew them out.
Yeah.
And because it just didn't catch on. And so once they blew them out, then that's where TB303s ended up in all the pawn shops. And that's where a lot of DJs and music producers, at the time, were able to pick those up for like $50.
Yeah, it's
and
ridiculous.
As they got them, they started messing with them, and then they noticed that they could synthesize and all these things. And I was like, whoa. And then they were putting the 707 drums with it. And then there you go. There's DJ Pierre, Future, and all these other guys, and the sound, the birth of Acid House and everything, came from that. That piano is what it was initially designed for, was to be a bass accompaniment for that. Same thing for the Jupiter 8. The Jupiter 8, like we all know it for these massive synth sounds and the programming, but the Jupiter, like when I spoke with, the Japanese designers, it was originally designed because it was supposed to sound like real orchestral instruments. So strings and those kinds of, they were trying to emulate real world orchestral instruments. And that's why you had the Jupiter 8, that's what it was supposed to do. But that's not what made it famous. So when they came out with the new Jupiters, you have all of those ROM sounds like pianos and all these things that are in it, and you can totally synthesize it, and it's really cool. But a lot of people were kind of baffled as why does this Jupiter have all these kinds of sounds in it, like orchestral, when the Jupiter 8 was a total synth. Like, that's what we want. We want a fully programmable, analog type of synth. And again, it's always, originally the Jupiter 8 was supposed to mimic, real string sounds and those kinds of things. And that's why the new Jupiter has those sounds in it, because that's what the initial concept of the Jupiter 8 was. it's not what we loved about it, but it's what the initial concept
What
was.
the initial concept was, yeah. Because last Friday you told me that you have seen this picture with this Piano Plus series and the TB303 and the TR606, and I went I searched for it, and then I found a picture of Oscar Peterson, this famous jazz guy.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
Yeah, you were talking about, and I found this picture of the Piano Plus 10 plus the TB303 and the TR606. I still have I have a record of Oscar Peterson. And it's amazing. And you've got this guy who's making wonderful jazz with the TB303 and the TR606. Wow. It's amazing. And then I see people, Zito Sonic says, and that's how Acid House was born, crack and pawn shop gear. Yep. So cool.
Yeah,
totally.
That's how it happened.
That's super cool. Super cool. Okay. No. I still have this picture. What's picture number 3? No, 4, 1. This one. This is you standing in front of a huge desk in a studio. You told me about this, that's where you did the sampling, right?
Yeah, so that is an SSL, I think it's the 4000 G Plus console that they have there at the Hamamatsu R&D Center. We didn't do the sampling sessions there for the MV. I actually wasn't in on the initial sample session. I did the ones for the second iteration of it. But the first one, they did it at one of the studios out in Hollywood, which had an SSL 4000 G Plus console. So it's the same console that was there, and we had an immaculate TR-808. Basically, all the drum machines that were included in the 8000 were all sampled like immaculately through this, SSL, 4000 G Plus console. The unit itself, it was like immaculate, pristine, clean TR-808, and they had the best engineers in there. And I know Jim Stout and a couple other guys were all part of that. And basically, they sampled the 808 at almost every single setting and dial, and that's why on the MV, when we talk about, when I hear people asking about really good, clean 808 samples, I don't think that there's anything else out there that sounds as good as the raw 808 samples that are on the MV. By far, they are the best. So if you want the best, cleanest 808s that you can process in any way, shape, or form, I mean, that's the best thing, is to get the cleanest source. And once you have the cleanest, immaculate source, then you can shape it almost into anything. So, the studio sessions that they did for all the drums on the MV were amazing. It was a ton of work to get it to sound so good. And then I know that once we were coming out with the MV-8800, then that's where I was asked to contribute additional sound content for it. And I know that Jim Stout was also on that. So Jim has a pretty large collection of vintage drum machines. I don't know if he has them anymore, but at the time he did. So he took a lot of his classic drum machines and went into that studio again, and they did sampling sessions on all of that stuff. So there's a vintage drum kit collection that you can get, and it's available on the Roland site, and I believe it came stock in the factory drum kits for the MV-8800. Mm-hmm. And then I did some custom 808 drum kits for the 8800 as well, because I had a Roland R8 Mark II with I think it was like the 808 card or a techno card in it.
Yeah.
And I took that and then I resampled all of the 808 sounds out of the R8 Mark II, because I personally loved, the sound of it in there. It was different. So I took all of those, processed them, and then
Wow.
built them into the MV as kits. And then I even did a bunch of custom drum kits from the V-Synth XT rack. So like the one that you have right behind you, I took a lot of the drum kits that we designed for that, and instead of just taking the raw samples that I already had,
Yeah.
I actually went and did the sampling session, through the MV so that you can get the analog to digital conversion happening on there and get the real deal tone of the S700 sample engine that's in here. And so did that. And again, those 808 sounds that are in there, they have a complete different tonality to them and everything. And it came out great, and it was fun, making all that stuff. So
Super cool. Super cool. So, okay. Let me ask you a question of the list, because Paul Gillies, he asked, because you're now talking with oh, by the way, thank you for the picture, because they're lovely. They're really lovely. You're talking now with MV fans, but what kind of machine would you suggest when there's no MV available?
no MV available. I mean, look, the reality is you can make music on anything.
Okay.
So it really becomes, I think, more of a personal preference. When I was initially showing the MV, it was one of the most difficult, gigs that I had, because it wasn't like you were showing a groove box or something else. I mean, this was a product that was targeted. This was a product that was targeting a very historic, competitive product that had and it still has a very long history and lineage within the hip hop world. And once you start doing something like that, you're going to have a ton of resistance. And I did. And people would just get very turned off, and they were very, defensive about things, because they felt like I'm coming in to try and tell them that the machine that they're using isn't good anymore, and this thing is better.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the case at all. And I used to, and I remember telling guys, I'm not here to tell you that the MPC is less than the MV, because I owned an MPC at one point. I did my first couple of albums on an MPC 60. So I know the workflow. I know the history. I know the lineage of it, and they are great machines. All I'm saying is this MV can do a lot of what the MPC does, but there are some very cool, unique things that the MV does that the MPC can't in some ways. And then the MPC can do certain things that the MV can, but the MV has a much easier and streamlined way of doing it.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm trying to show you. You can have them both working together. One isn't better than the other. It's a matter of preference.
Correct.
They both have their own unique tone. So, I always tried to leave it out there. I don't like to say this is better than that. It's easy to say that sometimes, but I also have to keep in mind that this has to really do with personal preference, and everybody. It's very subjective.
Correct.
And so I don't ever want to step on anybody's toes. With that. So all I ever tried to do was just show what the MV could do, show it in a way that was similar to working on an MPC, and I would just let the user make a decision on whether they liked it or not. I'm just trying to show you some cool things that you can do on it. And when I would approach it that way, then that usually kind of took down that defensive barrier, and then people understood.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm sorry. So back to the main question of when it comes to like, what would I say to use? I have to say, use whatever you feel 100% comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you complete a track. If you jump into something because somebody says you need to be making music with this, and it's really, you just don't connect with it, then the music that you're making is not going to really come out maybe the way that you want it.
Correct.
So I always say to find something that you connect with, that well, that you can vibe with and have a flow, because that's ultimately what it's all about. You need to be able to get whatever's in here, the ideas that you have, and get it out, onto whatever software or whatever hardware you have in a very easy fashion, so that you can continue going and keep flowing and getting the ideas in there. So whatever helps you do that the easiest, use that.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can relate to that. I bought the MPCX in summer last summer, and after a few months, I noticed I couldn't gel with it, and luckily, Marcos Pita, MC Flex, said to me, "Oh, Roger, please don't sell your MV. You will regret it." Yeah, I had the X for around 6 months, and then something was missing. Although I liked how quick it was and the connection, because when I connected my V-synths, it was recognized by the MPC, which is crazy because my computers, my Mac doesn't recognize the V-synths anymore. The drivers are not up to date, but the MPC-X connected, and you had MIDI through USB, which was awesome. But somehow I couldn't gel with it. So thank you, Marcus. Thank you for pushing me not to sell my MV. But really, really. So
no, I have an MPCX. It's right there. I love working on it.
I can imagine.
It's a different way of working.
Yeah.
So
I must admit, the ducking settings, it's awesome. It's super cool. And
when they finally added that in, that was fun.
That was really fun. And I noticed how to route in external audio, and then you could process the external audio with the touchscreen. That is also very cool. And yeah, of course, those kind of things I missed a lot. I missed a lot in the MV. But we were talking about SizeX, and SizeX is not recognized by the MPC-X, so it was for me quite a letdown. Anyway, super cool.
They work great together. Like, I did something where I had them both connected, and it was fun. Like, I had certain drums doing one things on here, and I had other chops and other things happening over there. More of the melodic stuff I had happening on the MPC, where more of the percussion and other I had happening on the MV, and it was awesome. It was just an experiment, but it's very, very cool.
I can imagine. I can imagine that. You know what stupid is? We're talking almost 2 hours, and the only thing you showed us on the MV was cutting a long phrase. So
I can do a few things. I think from just messages that I got, people were asking about like just basic sequencing and how to really like apply the quantizers and different things that they could do to make it swing a little bit better. And I know that people always still struggle with the quantizing and how that all works on the MV, especially if they come from if they're coming from like an MPC background and everything. The terminology alone is very different. So I know that's one thing where people get the confusion, is just the terminology is different. So
yeah,
like on the MPC, they call it a program, and on here we call it a patch. And that's ultimately what it is. So people get confused right away because they don't understand the terminology of this stuff. So, but so I was just going to show like how to do some sequencing and how I go about like using the MV, and just to come up with different feels of things, and then maybe showing some chopping stuff that I do. But I mean, if there's specific questions, I can show that right now. If no. I'm pretty much open.
No, I see people saying we need a part 2, and time flies when you're having fun, which is true.
We could do that too.
You know what? We are going to do a part 2, Mike, and then we are going to dive totally into the MV, because we went now from left to right, and well, I liked it a lot. But for sure, we want to receive more from your knowledge about this MV. We have a lot of questions about it. So I noticed something else, because in the back I see this TR-7. Oh, it's the TR-707, right?
Yeah, it's the original 707.
Awesome. And the JD-800. It's
Yeah, so it's the original 707, and then JD-800 over there. So just funny little story. Roger, I know I told you this one already, but so this 707, I ended up buying it for like, I don't know, like $50 or something like that.
no way.
Way back. Okay. But it's tough to see, but there's like, it used to have like this tape stain or something that was there, because sometimes they would tape stuff in the studios to tag things, but it left a nasty residue and stuff. So I was able to get some of it off. So most of it's off, but so this 707, there was this hip hop song that came out like in the late 80s, and it was by Gerardo, and it was called Rico Suave. And
I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, Rico Suave.
That's an old one.
Yeah. And so the guy Gerardo that did that track, he actually went on to be an exec over at Interscope. And he was in the scene here, and I don't know how it came up, but basically like he was selling off some gear, and my buddy Mike, he was another guy that worked at Roland. He was really good friends with him as well, because Mike used to teach, well, he still does. He teaches salsa dancing and choreography and all that stuff. So somehow through all of that dancing and everything, like they knew each other. And so basically like this is Rico Suave's 707.
No
so
way.
This is Gerardo's 707 that was used on that song for Rico Suave.
Rico.
He wasn't doing it anymore. So I was like, "You want it for $50, man?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool, I'll take it." And so I took it and I've kept it, and just because it's got a cool little story. And I remember when that record came out, and I played that record at parties at the time.
Of course.
But I've got the drum machine from that record. So
no way. Even in the Netherlands, that song was famous.
Yeah.
So
no, man,
cool.
He hit it with that song for sure. But it's funny now when you talk to him, because like he's got kids and his daughters and everything, and he was telling the story in an interview that he did one time, and he's like, he goes, "Yeah, I did that then, but that really wasn't for me." He goes, "I wanted to get more into the business. I wanted in more of the business side." He goes, "But it's been tough because like my daughters will see the music video come on, and it's like I have to tell them, no, Daddy was just playing. Like I didn't mean that, because he was womanizing in the video. Mr. Rico Suave with all these
Ricardo
ladies."
Suave.
Yeah, and now he's got daughters, and he was like, "Oh no, that was just playing. Like no."
Rico Suave. Very nice. I tell you the following. We received a donation from Nick Danger.
It's like $4.99.
Cool.
Tell the quantize. Oh, the qualitize.
The qualitize. I don't know what it is. Perhaps you know what it is.
I know what he's talking about.
Oh, tell the qualitize story. And okay.
So, I wish I would have known that because I actually sampled that guy. So, but basically, I wonder if I have that sample. Nah, never mind. It'll be too much to try to follow it. But basically, this guy went on YouTube, and he had an MV, and initially he was just talking smack about it because he felt that the MV's qualitize was not like the MPCs, and obviously what he meant to say was quantize, but he kept saying the qualitize of the MV. And so he was like, the first video he did, he was like, "No, this doesn't swing like the MPC. The qualitize is not. It can't do what the MPC does, and blah 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 blah." So then later, I guess somebody reached out to him I don't know if I ever spoke to him or sent him some tips or whatever, or somebody else from MV Nation. I can't really remember, but basically he ended up doing a follow-up video, and in the follow-up video, he says, "So I want to take back my statement because I was doing it wrong, and I will say that the MV does qualitize like the MPC, and in fact, it can do way more than the MPC. So I was wrong. I just want to clear it up and just say that the MV, it can qualitize, and it's just as good as an MPC. You can do way more." And so it was funny to to see that. But I thought it was cool. At least the guy, he went back and said, "No, no, no, I was wrong." Because there's some other guys where they will fight tooth and nail, and even after you show them, they still will not say you're correct, I'm wrong, and this guy did. He's like, "No, I was wrong." And so I respect him for that, and it was funny, it was cool. It's just one of those ones that you remember and stuff. But
super cool.
But yeah, that was the most common thing. Like, "Oh man, that thing can't swing like an MPC. It can't swing like an MP." And I was like, "All right, cool. Bring your MPC and let's go head to head. Bring it."
Let's qualitize. Super cool. Okay, so Nick, I hope this was the right answer to talk. To tell the qualitize story. Very cool. Mike, we're 2 hours now talking. So if you want, we do a part 2. We get another. We arrange another date. That sounds funny. We arrange another date. But I mean, we arrange another meeting, and then we go dive into the MV and do some tips and tricks, because I see, yes, we want to have more tips and tricks. Well, we only had one trick. So if you agree on that, then awesome. We all appreciate that. And then we will start immediately with the right link without any upload problem or whatsoever. So, Mike,
yep,
we're going to end this. I want to thank all the people in the chat and all the watchers, the viewers, and the MV community. Thank you so much for being on this show. But most important is, Mike, thank you for taking the time to be with us and to tell your great stories about the MV and your days at Roland. Very, very nice, very cool.
No, definitely. I enjoy it. Like I told you, I had been thinking about, because I got the MV back. I had some time to kind of refamiliarize myself with it, and I feel like I was kind of at that point now where it's like, this is a really cool machine. I know there's a big community out there, and obviously, to this day, it's like I still try to chime in on some of the MV groups to help, because I understand that it's a very misunderstood machine, but when you do get it, man, it's like uncovering one of the hidden unlocked treasures of the world. Like, it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff you can do. And I said it from day one. I felt that the MV at some point would probably have close to the same status. I'm not saying the same. I'm not going to say that.
No.
I will say that it will have close to the same status as some legendary samplers like the MPC and the SP. I feel that the MV-8800 and the SP-404, those samplers will be a part of that lineage of history 20, 30 years from now. I feel like they will still be one of those very special units. And because I had gotten it, I was thinking about doing a live stream to be able to open up for the community to be able to ask questions and go through things and stuff, because I know that it's tough, when you get into one of these, and because it's an old machine, it can be difficult to find answers for things. Luckily, there's videos, but I know that there's a lot of modernized questions, right? Like, we're talking about plugins today and things, and how to get it to work with certain things today. And obviously, there's not a lot of content out there around that stuff. So I was already thinking of, trying to do something to be able to, answer some questions and get more involved with the MV community. So once I saw that you were doing that, I was like, oh, well, great. Somebody's already doing it. So that's awesome. And, I if I can help in any way, like I will definitely do part 2 with you, and we can plan it a little better so this time we're talking about history and more, things. And then next time, maybe we can make it more of a interactive, ask questions, and I can do one-on-one how to do a certain thing or whatever, or I can do a little demo on remixing or something like that. Whatever you guys want to do, I am totally open to it. And Roger, man, thanks for doing this. Obviously, you're doing a really good service for all the MV community. I know how helpful MV Nation was when it was around. It helped thousands. Okay, and I'm saying thousands and thousands. It helped a lot of people, make those purchasing decisions. Unfortunately, it sucks that MV Nation really isn't around anymore, and I understand that it costs money to have a dedicated forum like that going. But so long as the other Facebook forums are there, like I said, I'm a part of all of them. I think, at least I try to be, and I will be around to answer questions, whenever I can. But definitely, we will do a follow up to this and go a little bit deeper into it. We could even turn it into a 3-part series if we want. I would say like maybe, part 3, we can show how to do full integration into like Ableton. I know that I did see questions from people on
I know.
how to put the MV, how to put the MV like in a multi-timbral mode, and if you want to sequence everything from the MV inside Ableton but still trigger it from the MV, it's totally doable, and I can show you guys how to do that stuff as well. So whatever you guys want to do, I'm sure Roger will put up some questions, maybe next time 5 topics, maybe do a poll and have people vote on it, and whichever 3 topics have the most votes, that's what we'll do for the next session, and then we'll do the same thing for the 3rd one.
Look at that. You make the MV community very happy with saying this all, and me including, and we will arrange it. Very cool. Very, very nice. Okay. Again, thank you so much all for being here on the chat. So many great comments. Really appreciate it. I wish you, Mike, and the rest of the people a great night, or a great day, or a great morning. And we see each other next time. Have a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.